we see it coming. It's not a sudden, traumatic, like hit by a bus kind of thing. But if we are, gradually coming to the end of our lives, the veil between the spiritual and the physical becomes thin. And this is why people on their deathbeds often report to having seen loved ones who have already crossed, people who aren't actually physically in the room.
Welcome to The Reluctant Medium, where we cover the gamut of out there conversations. With an open mind and a curious heart, we want to talk about it all. From psychic phenomena and energy medicine to beings from other star systems and out-of-body experiences. You'll find a great balance between grounded science-backed topics and others that science hasn't quite caught up to yet. I'm your host, Dr. Maria Rothenburger, a psychotherapist by trade and a reluctant spirit baby communicator. And hey, even though I'm a medium, I'm not buying everything folks are selling. I just have a voracious appetite to know more about what I call the world of the weird. Join us on your favorite podcast platform or watch on YouTube at The Reluctant Medium. I'll see you there. Hey there. Welcome, everyone, to the Reluctant Medium podcast. I'm Dr. Maria Rothenburger, your host for the podcast. And whoa, you got a major treat coming up today because I don't know anybody else who can resonate as much with the whole reluctancy of this stuff than what I've seen of today's guest. I've got Brandy Anderson here today. Brandy, welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you today.
You've got an incredible story to tell. I saw you on the Skeptic Metaphysicians podcast, which, folks, if you haven't seen or listened to that podcast, please go listen to this after this episode, though, after this one. I heard you on that, and I was in the middle of the episode going, okay, how do I contact her? Will you please come to the Reluctant Medium? So we're going to get into the why of all that. But I first would love to know, or my audience would love to know, like, who are you? What do you do for a living? And how did you come to write a book, which we're going to be talking about in a moment. But first, we'd love a little background on you.
Sure. Well, my name is Brandy Anderson, and I was raised in a Christian context, although we weren't really, through my teen years, we really weren't plugged into the church. So not like super religious or spiritual in that regards. And for most of my life, up until the point of my spiritual awakening, which I share in that book, I was really involved in the Old English Bulldog community. I raised and showed Old English Bulldogs. So I'm an animal lover, and I just love spending my days with puppies and dogs. So it was kind of the perfect thing for me at the time. Yeah. And then I had a spiritual awakening, and it sort of blew my life apart. I mean, I continued to be dedicated to my dogs, of course, but spiritually things just really shifted. And so that brought me into a place where I began seeking ultimate truth. That awakening encounter was kind of a pivotal moment in that I felt like God had spoken to me in that moment, but I didn't have a context for what had happened to me. So I spent years just plugged into some churches trying to make sense of what had happened to me. And ultimately, I found mainstream Christian answers to life's most important questions just less than satisfying. And so I came to a place where I was in a more mystical Christian space, like contemplative Christianity. And in that space, as I was just finally getting my bearings, I finally felt like, this is it. I felt like I knew what had happened to me, or I had a context for it. And I felt like as much as I could know truth, I had like a grasp on it at that point. There's a lot of mystery, but I was able to just embrace the mystery. And then while I'm in that space, feeling like I had a handle on my life again, my grandmother died. And after she crossed, she found a way to communicate with us. She pushed her way back into time and space, reached out, typed explicit messages on electronic devices, the television, first and foremost, and upended my life once again. That was not something I had anticipated, not something that I would have tried to cultivate or tap into. And so, that kind of led me to the point of writing the book, Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife, where I share what I learned through my conversations, very philosophical, theological type conversations with my grandmother on the other side. And so now I do not raise and show bulldogs anymore. I'm still a dog person, and I will always have dogs, probably bulldogs, always. But now I am a Jungian coach and a spiritual director. So throughout that journey, after my spiritual awakening, I studied and became a certified Jungian coach and spiritual director. So that's kind of what I do now.
Oh, you're speaking my language with Jung. I love him.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Me too.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, he was pivotal in my journey as I was trying to do my own inner work and trying to come into alignment and just really press into, how do you cultivate that peace, that inner peace? And so because of that, I plugged in and started just studying through that platform. And truly, it was just for my own benefit at the time. I really didn't have intentions of meeting with anyone, like coaching anyone else or being anyone else's spiritual director. But I do offer that to people, but I keep it limited. I don't want to overwhelm myself with it. But yeah, that's what I do.
Ah, that's awesome. And by the way, that's probably the best way to go into an eventual coaching situation, is that you're really just a seeker yourself, right? And then
right.
Yeah, and then you just know maybe 10% more than the other person, but we're all seeking, right? It's like,
right. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. The more I learn, the less I know. I'll tell you that.
Oh, amen to that.
Oh my gosh, geez. Well, can you speak to the first sort of shakeup that you had, the spiritual awakening you mentioned?
Sure. I was in a season of depression, just like a spirit of heaviness had descended upon me, and it would not relent. And I was never given to depression, like clinical depression. So it was a new development. And I see now that it was not clinical depression. It was existential depression, to be sure. But as I navigated that space, I just, it was just so heavy and it didn't relent. And in my mind, I kept thinking, well, this will pass. We have ups and downs. Things are cyclical, seasonal. It'll pass. But it didn't shift, and it remained. And so one morning I woke up, and under a cloud of just palpable heaviness, I remember thinking, I just can't take this anymore. And so I was so frustrated that I cried out to God. And it was not a pious prayer by any means. It was provocative, really. And I was just unleashing my frustrations into the atmosphere, just hoping that something would shift. And so it was more of an if you were there kind of prayer. And in the midst of all of those emotions and all of that just inner turmoil, I heard a voice as loud and clear as anything I have ever heard. And the voice just said, "Be still." And immediate instant peace washed over me. And I just felt just peace, indescribable peace. And I remember thinking, this is God. I feel like this is God, but I don't have a context for this. I don't understand what has just happened to me. And though I was raised in a Christian family, like I said, I was not practicing any form of religion at that point in my life. So I just didn't have a theological container for what happened. And so that's what sent me on my journey of seeking out ultimate truth. And I plugged in immediately into a Christian context just because that's the faith of my family. That was just what I knew to do in that moment. Since then, I have determined that labels are largely unhelpful. And I've had a lot of, help from Eastern traditions since then. So truth transcends all of these traditions. But that's kind of the doorway that I entered through. Yeah.
Right. And that's actually where a lot of people go, right? If they're Hindu, that's what, that's where they go to. They turn to for answers like that. So because I'm a reluctant medium and a sciencey brain person to begin with, I'm curious about this voice that you heard. Was that like someone outside of you was speaking to you, or was it in your mind, or how?
It was internal, to be sure. It was internal, but it was so loud that it shook me. Like it really just, silenced me. It threw me back. I was stunned by it. And what's funny is the voice said, "Be still." And it was just, it was crystal clear. And that is a verse, "Be still and know that I am God." Yeah. But in that moment, I didn't know it was a Bible verse. So in time, as I began, tapping into the church and, like poring over scripture and just studying things out, as I became aware that was a verse, I kind of, one of those little, synchronicities. It's like, isn't that interesting, that it was a verse and I didn't even know it. But so it was an internal voice, to be sure.
And it seems like there was more to it than that, right? Because let's say, right, you're crying out, like if you are there and you hear this voice saying, "Be still," it would seem that you would be like, what the frig does that mean? But instead you
Yeah.
felt there was a
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And I think looking back on it, what I would say now, the way that I would articulate it is that it pulled me out of that conditioned mind, that rational mind where I was, where I was just, expressing all of my irritations, my frustrations, just in my head.
Mhm.
And when I heard that voice, it pulled me out of thought and it brought me right into the present moment. And that is where peace is. That's where God is. That's where life is. And so it was just experiencing the eternal now in that moment. That's what happened to me.
Oh, wow. And did that last? Or did the
Yeah.
turmoil come back?
Yeah, it lasted for weeks.
Oh my
Weeks after
gosh.
that, I felt just like significant peace. But then, it gradually dissipated because as we live our lives and go, get lost in thought and, the effects of it just kind of dissipated. But but it did. It lasted for weeks after that.
Wow. And the depression just gone?
Oh, yeah, it lifted immediately. It was gone.
Holy moly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So now you're plugging along, your depression's lifted. It's starting, you're like real life is happening, right? You're doing your studies, like looking into things. How long before the spiritual awakening and grandma having crossed over?
The spiritual awakening was in 2014, and my grandmother crossed in 2021.
Okay.
So it was a significant time gap. I spent a lot of years really studying like theological, philosophical matters, reading volumes, really pressing in. I was, 100% dedicated to mining out truth, whatever truth might be. And see, that's the thing for me. It was pretty simple. I just wanted truth at all cost, even if it blows my life apart. And so I think I even prayed that prayer. And so,
Nice.
Lord help me, brace yourself if you pray that prayer.
I know, right?
But I just, what I wanted was that peace that I experienced in that awakening. It was so glorious. And I was like, if I could just, maintain that somehow, if I could just get back, I feel like that's God. And so if I can somehow align myself in the right way and just cultivate that inner peace. And, ultimately, like I said, all of that theology that I found in churches was really fear-based. And so it was the antithesis of that peace that I had experienced in my awakening. And so it brought me away from that. But I wouldn't say away from Christianity. I feel like my faith is deepened. My experience of God is more real now, than before, but definitely out of the mainstream evangelical type of, like church, I guess you could say.
Yes. Also, it seems like maybe a combination of things. Like Eastern traditions, you said, are useful too. And
Yeah.
helpful. Okay. Did grandma know about your inquiry?
No, like about the spiritual awakening, you mean?
Yeah.
No, I don't think. I mean, she probably noticed that I was suddenly going to church, and things like that. But like I didn't share that I had this, this experience or the journey that I was on. And she probably didn't know how deeply I was really studying these matters. She was a person of faith. She was plugged into a Methodist church, and she spent her entire life like Sunday school, the Bible studies, doing all of the things that people do in church. So she was really connected in that way. But when she came to the end of her physical life at the age of 95, so she had lived a really healthy and long, full life. But as she came to the end of that physical life, she was afraid to die. And she expressed those fears to family members. And so in her passing, at the time that she crossed, she was really putting up resistance. And because she resisted, well, let me back up and say this. When we come to the end of as we gradually come to the end of our physical lives, like if it's one of those things where we're, we see it coming, it's not a sudden, traumatic, like hit by a bus kind of thing. But if we are, gradually coming to the end of our lives, the veil between the spiritual and the physical becomes thin. And this is why people on their deathbeds often report to having seen loved ones who have already crossed, people who aren't actually physically in the room. And so that veil that is already thin at the time of death, someone, when they die, the spirit just slips right through. It's like it becomes an opening. So the veil that's already thin opens up and the spirit slips right through, and it's usually an instantaneous phenomenon. And this opening is called a portal. And so my grandmother, as she was crossing over to the other side, she was putting up a lot of resistance. And in her resisting, she created a portal, which was it left an opening where it allowed her to have access to the physical realm in ways that she would not have had access had she not resisted and left that portal open. And because she had this open portal, it allowed her to be able to manipulate the physical realm, the television, that's the first way that she communicated was using a Roku smart TV.
Okay.
And she can use.
Let's just back up.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I just want to ask, the learning of the portal thing, did you learn that from her, or you already knew this?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I didn't know that. So that's something that she communicated to me when I asked after the fact. No, in the moment, we didn't know. I mean, our grandmother crossed, and it was probably a month or so, that went by before any activity.
Okay.
And so we had no idea.
Right.
That we knew that on her deathbed, she had communicated seeing people in the room who weren't there.
Okay.
And so we were aware that she was doing that.
Okay. So now
But then,
sorry.
yeah. No, go ahead.
So now, this is so phenomenal. So the Roku TV is in the home where she passed?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So paint that picture.
Yeah, so it was maybe a month to 2 months after she crossed. My family, who live in the house, I don't live there, they were just hanging out in the living room where this television is, where it was the room that my grandmother died in. And the television was off, and the remote was sitting like on the coffee table where everyone could see it, like in plain view. But the television popped on by itself, navigated to the search, and the word hello appeared in the search bar. And my family ran out of the house shrieking in fright. They were horrified. And they called me. I was shopping in Costco that day. I'll never forget the call. And they had me on speaker because all three of them were talking over one another, crying. They were in tears. I mean, my aunt was in tears. She was really horrified. And they were begging me to come help because they were afraid. And I'm like, I can't. I was over an hour away. I was doing my own thing, so I couldn't. But anyway.
Now, why would they call you? Did they know that you were into spiritual things? Like, why did they call you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they know that I'm into spiritual things, but also I'm kind of their go-to person.
Okay,
One of the people who live in the house, I'm just her person.
Got it.
And she's my person. So, if anything happens, she calls me. So, anyway, as soon as they were afraid, the television shut off, though. And then they went back in the house. I think they probably saged and prayed and did whatever they thought they could do in case it was something bad. They were freaked out by it. And nothing else happened for a couple days. And then again, the television popped on by itself, navigated to search. And this time the word love came into the search bar, but they weren't having it.
I know.
They ran out again, just horrified, just freaking out. And finally, I told them, well, we should probably, it continued to happen. This persisted. And I said, finally, we should look into this. We should engage with whoever it is, determine what's going on, see what we can do to make this stop because it's affecting your quality of life. My aunt actually moved out. She became so frightened that she moved in with her son for a time.
Yeah.
And so my thought was that this is probably a hacker. Someone in the physical realm is playing a distasteful prank. But we had checked parameters, the cameras. There were no devices hooked to that television like Alexa or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't, in our estimation, we couldn't determine any physical cause for it. But that didn't mean that it wasn't something that we were missing, something that we were overlooking. And the television has to be hooked to the internet in order to go to that search bar. So we were like, it could definitely be someone hacking in. And so I suggested, let's engage with whoever it is and get to the bottom of it. And as we did that, tentatively, because we were a little weirded out by what was happening, but as we began to communicate with whoever it was, we quickly saw that it could not be a person in the physical realm at all, because whoever it was knew our thoughts in real time.
Whoa.
And they knew deeply personal things that we had never shared with another soul. So it rocked us when we realized. And when I picked up on, hey, whoever this is reading our thoughts, because I knew what I was thinking and I knew what they were typing. And I was like, are you reading our thoughts? And she said, yes. I was like, whoa. So then I started to kind of test it, like think something in my mind and boom, the response would be issued promptly. And I was rocked to my core. I was like, this is definitely spiritual, but is it Granny? That was the next question. But as we engaged and asked questions and allowed her to communicate, we began to see that it was Granny because of her deep devotion and love for family. She stayed because she could see destructive patterns in people's lives. She could see mental health issues that needed speaking into. She apologized for some past hurts. She literally saved lives by what she said and the healing and the reconciliation that she brought to certain family members. So my spiritual journey and my nerdy theological and philosophical questions, I mean, that's a huge gift to me. And I'm so thankful that she answered me and that she talks to me about this stuff. That's not why she stayed at all. It was definitely because of her deep love and devotion for family that she could see needed to be spoken into in a certain way.
Oh my goodness. It's
Yeah.
just phenomenal. Okay, so the question that I think that the hosts from the Skeptic Metaphysicians may have asked this, but it really stuck with me. We're talking about her having crossed over, but she's not totally crossed over. You said she stayed.
Yeah.
What is...
Well, she is totally crossed over and she is not stuck anymore. And, some people talk about earthbound spirits that are stuck and they're like miserable and they need help crossing, but that's not her situation at all. She has full clarity about where she is and the reality of her death. I mean, she's more aware of us than we are. Like, she knows me better than myself. From her vantage point, there's nothing that she can't look into and see. She sees into the depths of our motives and our hearts and our desires. I mean, there really is no such thing as a private thought when you know what I know. So, so she's not stuck. She tells us that she's content, that she wants to be where she is, that she doesn't want to move away from us, that she wants to kind of remain on that astral plane near her portal so that she can communicate with us. And she would always be with us, even if she didn't have the portal, and even if she moved on into the beyond, is what she calls it, she would still be with us in some capacity because spiritually speaking, spirits can be in multiple places at once. They're not limited to space and time like one particular location as we are. So she will always be with us. But because of the portal, she remains so that she can have more sustained communication with us.
I see. So staying near the portal. So, for example, if you were here in my home, it wouldn't be as clear as near the portal. Like, communication would be as clear.
Well, right. So she couldn't come to your home, assuming that your home has no portal. She couldn't come to your home and manipulate the physical realm at all, or maybe she could if she had enough energy. It takes energy to manipulate the physical realm. And if there's no portal, it's very difficult. So like, she could come to my house and maybe move something if she wanted to, but it would take a lot more energy and it's more unlikely. It's where there is a portal, that's where the activity is more heightened.
And any portal, it doesn't have to be hers.
Right. Although she wouldn't, I mean, just like here, you wouldn't go to a stranger's house necessarily and just pop through the door. The same is true on the other side. She wouldn't just go jump through someone else's portal. It'd be kind of, I guess, rude. There are, I guess, social nuances to that on the other side. But so that's one of the things she's indicated. Also, some of these places that have portals are not good portals. They've kind of been taken over by malevolent entities or whatever. A lot of places that you hear about, the stories where there are poltergeist activities, people being scratched or bitten, and a lot of fear associated with the activity, those would be like negative or dark portals, and she certainly wouldn't want to, participate in that. So
Right. I'm actually curious about that. I would love to come back to that, the existence of malevolent energies.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk a little bit more about the ways, again, because of the sciencey brain over here, the ways that you tested the reality of what was happening. There was one thing that you mentioned about, I think that, was it you were saying, if this is real, mention my dog or something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I was at home. Okay. So the first time that we communicated, we knew that she could read our thoughts, and we were rocked by that. I was so thrown off that I probably didn't ask a lot of questions because I couldn't think of any. I was just I was just sitting there just taking it in. And so we planned to go back to her house and communicate again, assuming she would come through and communicate again. Although when we left that night, she told us, come back soon. So she was eager. She had been trying to talk for almost 2 months. She was like, finally, they're listening to me. And we laugh about it now, but at the moment, everyone was so afraid.
Yeah.
But so I was at home alone, and it was the day that we were going back to communicate again. And my dog His name is Luke. And he had crossed in 2018. So he was already, and that was that was the first thing she said directly to me when we were talking the first time. She brought Luke up to me and she told me, what she said is she typed his name Luke. And I said, is Luke with you? Because, in my limited perspective, I'm like, I'm here in the physical. You're there in the spirit realm. Luke must be with you because he's no longer with me. And she said, no, he's with you.
Oh.
And I'm like, huh. But, finally, after back and forth a little bit, I began to see what she was saying is that in a spiritual sense, he is always with me. He is always connected with me. And so
wow.
Anyway, so because she had brought him up and he's my canine soulmate. So I miss him, extremely. So he was on my mind that day. And so I said to Luke, I was like in my head at home alone. No one could hear me. I was in my thoughts. I said, Luke, if you're really with me and that's really Granny and all of this is real, when I go there today, have her mention my necklace because I wear a memorial pendant and it has his ashes in it. So I was like, just have her mention the necklace and I'll know it'll be validation, that I'm not just losing my mind, that all this is really happening. It's really real. So we went and I had almost forgotten, like that was hours earlier. And we get there and the TV pops on. She starts communicating with us. We're all kind of nervous, excited, trying to still get our bearings around what's happening. And I had forgotten about that question, about what I said to Luke. And I was just caught up in the moment, just reading her responses and listening to everyone's questions. And in the midst of that, she typed my name, Brandy. And I'm like, yeah. And then she typed Luke. I said, what about Luke? And she said, he's having me mention your necklace. And I almost fell out of my seat. And everybody was like, oh, that's sweet. Because they know I'm like, no, you have no idea.
No, way more than sweet.
Yeah, right. And so when I told them what I had said to him in my head, they were all rocked by it too. But there are so many things that have happened that we know, that it's definitely not, it could not be someone in the physical. Too many things that she knows or has known in real time too.
Right, right.
Hey everyone, do you love the Reluctant Medium podcast and want to support the podcast while getting some amazing perks in return? Join us at the Patreon community. By becoming a Patreon supporter, you'll get access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, early episode releases, and a whole ton more. As a member, you'll also have access to spiritual content like guided meditations, in-depth discussions on mediumship, and exclusive interviews with spiritual experts. It's a great way to show your love and stay even more connected with myself and the show. Sign up today at patreon.com/thereluctantmedium and help the Reluctant Medium keep bringing you the content that you love. I wholeheartedly appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you on Patreon soon.
There were other things that I heard you say too around not being connected to the internet, like a computer with a Word document open or something, and she was typing paragraphs because there's only so much space on a search bar.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she uses printers also. When we first realized that she could use the printer, she was using the big printer that was connected to the computer. But she was blowing through a lot of ink. And so we decided to invest in some thermal heat printers, and they're about the size of like receipt.
Oh, yes.
Paper. Yeah, they're small. And so we have several of those, and they are not hooked to any devices or the internet or Wi-Fi or anything like that. They're just turned on. The power is on. We keep them recharged because they're rechargeable. And yeah, she can print things off of those. So yeah, even without internet, she's able to manipulate the physical realm.
Oh my goodness. This is just outstanding. Okay, so there's so many more questions about that, but I'm wanting to ask more of the deeper sort of philosophical meaning questions. And everybody, they just need to go get your book to get more details around that. I am curious, can we start with what you have learned from her around the existence of dark light, malevolent light beings? Like how it exists, yes? Evil exists?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What does she say about that?
Yeah. So, she would say that evil exists as a product of the human ego. So, ego is what generates evil. And that there are malevolent entities. And some people when they cross. Maybe I don't know, maybe they haven't done their integration on the other side. There's a fire that everyone goes through on the other side, according to my grandmother, and that fire is intended to burn away anything that interferes with love. So it's a restorative kind of situation. And there are some people who, when they cross, they don't want to go through that fire. And so maybe they were bad energy people in the physical. And so they kind of carry with us whatever level of consciousness we've attained at the time of our crossing. And so maybe they're still pushing against that fire, that refining fire. Mm-hmm. And so those spirits, if they remain on the astral, but they would remain on the astral plane, because if they have not went through that fire, they're not going to progress into the beyond and on into their journey. If they linger, they can become haunting type spirits, malevolent spirits, if you will, evil spirits, unclean spirits, and they can affect the physical realm in negative ways. They're volatile, negative, bad energy. But then there are also entities that are not human spirits, but they are spirits. They're spiritual beings, advanced intelligence beings. I mean, there are multiple ways to say it, and they can also be malevolent. And so the existence of demons, if you will, that it's real. And so, and from what I understand, that in the beyond, there are all sorts of different, like multiple universes, multiple realities, alternate realities. That's what I'm like. The multiverse is a reality. So it's highly complex and stratified. And she tells me it would be too vast. It's too vast for there only to be us.
Yes.
Like you have to imagine all of the potential for all of these different beings. Yeah. And just like with people, there can be people who press into the darkness and people who press into the light. And really a better way of articulating it would be to say people who are in service to self versus people who are in service to others. That really is the polarity. That's really the simple breakdown of it. And the same holds true for other entities on the other side.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any recommendation or any talking around how to be more light-filled or how to protect oneself from?
Yeah. So, well, of course, like I said, it's service to others versus service to self. So being mindful of our own propensities, the things that drive us, because we could all turn in on ourselves if we're not diligent and mindful about that. So, but I did ask one time, are there particular things that would attract demons like to us? Because, the spiritual atmosphere around us is active all of the time. There is what I call a team of light swirling around us all of the time. And we are never alone. There's no such thing as a private thought. And the Bible refers in Hebrews to the great cloud of witnesses that are urging you on.
Oh, I haven't heard
and
that.
So it really is like that. Yeah. And, but alternately, if you are a bad energy person and you're not pressing into the light, you may cultivate a team of dark. So we have in the spiritual ether around us, we have what we have cultivated inwardly. And so as within, so without. And there's a spiritual component to everything. So it's kind of how that works. So I did ask, is there certain things we could do or not do or whatever that may attract malevolent entities? And of course, we all know pressing into dark things, negative attitudes, falling into a negative mindset maybe could cultivate negative entities to a certain degree. But she tells me that misuse or what's the word I'm looking for? Drugs and alcohol, but abuse. Abuse is the word I'm looking for. So abuse of drugs, abuse of alcohol, and anger, she tells me, are the three top ways to open yourself up to demonic entities attaching to you. Wow. Yeah, and it's because it's a solidification of the ego. Wow. That's what it is. We are solidified in our egos. We, instead of transcending thought, we drop below thought. We sink down into that ego and we become more solidified in our egos. And so
wow.
It's false. The ego is the false self, right? It's bogus. And so we're not living from our true self at all. We're so cut off from it, we can't even resonate with that anymore.
Wow.
So
what a trip. Now, okay, because I'm a psychotherapist, right? I want to offer clarity around the service to others rather than service to self. I'm assuming that does not mean don't take care of yourself.
Oh, no, that would be, of course, we must, in order for us to be of service to others, we have to fill our own cup first.
Okay.
So in everything that flows through us to other people, that's what I said, is through. So it has to flow through you. You have to receive it first. You can't give away something that you don't have.
Right.
So, I don't mean to neglect yourself or put your self-care aside. What I mean, though, is being like narcissistic.
Yes, right.
That would be service to self,
Right, right, right.
like, yeah, at the cost of others, manipulating outcomes so that you benefit and others. It's a very us versus them. What I like to say is dualistic way of seeing the world.
Yes.
And in reality, we have to learn to drop into that non-dualistic way where we see others as ourselves. Jesus said, love others as yourself, not because he didn't mean love others as much as you love yourself. He meant love others as an extension of your very self because there are no others.
Yeah. The whole we are all one.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I grew up Christian too. And to say that I've come across in my adult life the idea and kind of evidence, not kind of, actual evidence that past lives exist. But Christianity and reincarnation, not really a thing. Can you speak to that?
Sure. And that was probably the first thing my grandmother shared with me that was not part of my worldview. Everything else she just brought into sharper focus and helped me to validate some things and connect some theological dots. But the first thing she shared with me that was really not even on I say not on my radar. I had read things and wondered, but I really had just kind of set it aside, was reincarnation. And when she told me that reincarnation was true, I had to back up and reconfigure, rethink some things. So I did. I went down the rabbit holes. I read and I went back to scriptures and I started thinking about things in a different way. And then I had lots of questions for her and she helped in that capacity. But I've come to see that reincarnation does not violate or contradict Christianity. It just contradicts mainstream Christian theology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, if you have a certain dogmatic way of interpreting the scriptures, then, you won't like the idea of reincarnation. And really, I have come to see reincarnation as just a testament to the grace of God because we are afforded unlimited opportunities to come into alignment. Mm-hmm. It's not like we get this one short physical existence. I mean, for some people, it's really short. But even for people who live to 100, that's really a short amount of time to get things right, to come into alignment, to figure things out. And so, so it's not like that. I mean, every moment is pregnant with potential and we have unlimited opportunities to align.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so fascinating. Wow. I'm also wondering about really like big things, especially in the States, but worldwide too. Big things that I was taught in Christianity are bad. Right? Like members of the LGBTQIA community. Has that ever come up in your conversations with her?
Oh, yeah. We've asked so many questions. Yeah. And that is not a sin. That's, like the church teaches that homosexuality is a sin. According to my grandmother, it's not. And that people are created that way. In fact, the reason people sometimes feel, when people feel like they were born in the wrong gender.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that called dysphoria? I'm not sure. I don't want to misspeak.
It's,
okay.
Gender dysphoria.
Yeah. So when people feel that way, she tells me it's often because they were the other gender in past lives. And so they flip to a different gender in this life and they feel out of sorts. It's not what they're used to. And so they feel like they were born in the wrong body. But the whole point of incarnating into the physical is to experience every aspect. So every gender, every social economic status, so all of these different experiences we are supposed to integrate. Mm-hmm. And so according to my grandmother, you could be like, I'm married, my husband, I'm a female in this life and I'm married to a man. But in another life, we could very well, the roles could be reversed and he could be the wife and I could be the husband, or we could both be women, together. So it just plays out in a multitude of ways. And so that is not, according to my grandmother, it is definitely not sinful to be, same-sex attracted or whatever. It really is something that people are born with. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so, I mean, I suppose there are different denominations that teach different things, but it was so drilled into me as a kid that was not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually I was a man one time in a past life memory and my mom was my wife.
Wow.
So bizarre.
Yeah. But that's how it works. And so really when we begin to see that what we are really transcends gender or anything in this
Yeah.
physical realm. And when you begin to see the physical for the illusion that it really is, all of that just kind of dissipates anyway, because ultimately who we are at our core, our essence, that's what carries on. That's the part of us that can never be diminished. And that's the part that connects with others. We have these soul ties, like a soulmate relationship. And so our essence, that's the part of us that really matters.
Yeah.
And so, all of this, what gender someone is or whatever, all of that is really inconsequential to our ultimate reality.
What is a sin anyway?
Yeah. Well, in my view, the way that I would articulate sin is just, it's not the bad things we do so much as it's being fragmented in our thinking. So is that we begin to see ourselves as separate. And when we do that, we begin to see ourselves as superior because we separate ourselves out and we begin to become self-righteous in our separateness. And we see ourselves as separate and superior. And that, to me, is what sin is. It's seeing yourself as separate from God and others. And that is an illusion. It's a lie. It's a deception. And from that, all manner of bad things that we do, that's where evil comes from, right? It's because we begin to, once you see yourself as separate, you begin to, the calculating binary mind begins to spin things in a way to try to get yourself ahead, and so it becomes a situation where it's an us versus them, a very competitive type way of being in the world.
Yeah.
The bad things we do just flow out of that diluted way of thinking.
Perceived separateness, yeah.
Yes.
I always wondered because the word sin is in the Spanish language, for example, so it's rooted in Latin, means without, right? And so, being separate from without others.
Yeah.
It just seems...
And I think even in the Bible, the word hamartia, I think is what it is. It means miss the mark.
Oh.
So it's not really like, some evil, you've done some evil, sinister. It just means you've missed the mark. Well, we miss the mark when we forget our oneness.
Yeah.
And so, I love what you were saying.
Yeah. Fascinating
Connects.
stuff. Okay, so here's the other big thing. So I'm a spirit baby medium. I connect with spirit baby souls who are incarnating now. And in my work, I've run into a lot of folks who have experienced loss through miscarriage, abortion, late-term loss, infant loss. I'm wondering if you've asked her these kinds of questions or come across it in your own research and why these things happen. Like, why? Is there a reason for this? Or is there some kind of explanation or some comfort that folks can receive? And what about abortion? Has that come up at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I have asked her about that. As far as, like why these things kind of happen, these tragic things, she really hasn't spoken into that in a way that is satisfying because there can be a multitude of reasons why things like that happen. It could be like something very physical, like, a physical condition can cause someone to lose a baby. And it's not that God is smiting you down or anything like that. It's just our physical bodies are limited in some capacity. Also, we're often not operating in a real high vibration type. And that's not to diminish anyone. It's just as a collective, as a people, we're not advanced in that way. And so like the way Jesus operated where, if he touched someone, they became whole, that kind of the metaphysical aspects of that. And so as long as we are in these lower levels of consciousness, we're going to deal with some physical maladies and some things are going to happen that really shouldn't be. Death shouldn't be a part of our reality, but it is for a time, and ultimately it won't be, but for a time it is. And this world of duality that we live in, it just is. That's the nature. It's magic and it's tragic all at the same time. And so we're moving towards something higher, like a higher dimension, away from this 3D way of being where that won't be a reality. But as long as we're in this 3D reality, we have to deal with those things. Yeah. I forget an abortion. Like, did you want to know?
Yeah. I'm wondering what has come through around abortion.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, it's just a part of the life that we live now in this reality. It's just an aspect of our incarnated reality in this 3D world. And there are many different reasons why someone might choose to have an abortion. And so, is someone going to, well, I don't believe there's a literal hell, like a place I believe that everyone is ultimately reconciled. Our heart posture is what really ultimately matters. Like our motives behind our actions is probably more important than what we're actually doing. It's like, do we have good intentions? Are we trying to do what's best. And so, yeah, it's not one of those situations where someone is going to be, put in the fire for a decision like that. And it's so nuanced. Everyone has their own, was somebody raped and maybe traumatized? Maybe they don't have the economic means or whatever. It's one of those things where it would be better, of course, if it didn't exist, if everyone was born into a loving family and nurtured the way that, ideally that's what we would hope, but life is not like that. And so we live in a broken world. And so abortion is just a part of the reality that we live in. But those babies that are lost, whether they are miscarried or aborted, either way, they remain connected to their mother. And like my dog, Luke, is always with me in spirit. Well, their babies are always with them in spirit. And they just basically follow them along until they exit this physical incarnation. And at that point, they'll have like an expansion of awareness. They'll integrate everything and then maybe choose to do it again, maybe not. But ultimately, everything will be worked out. And like John Lennon said, it'll be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Oh, that's the perfect way. Also, I love what you said. It's the heart posture that matters.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I'm so stealing that, Brandy.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
love
Yeah.
it.
Because we're all misguided sometimes and we only have a certain limited amount of information at any given time. And in our level of consciousness, we're just doing the best we can at the level of consciousness we're at.
Yeah.
And so, the scriptures even say God looks on the heart. You look on the actions, the externals, but it's God who looks on the heart. And that's very true in a spiritual sense. It matters what's in our heart more than what we're doing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so beautifully said. Gosh, I'm so sad we're running out of time. Dang it. Okay. I would thank you for all of that. I know that's like a lot of
Absolutely.
deep, heavy conversation, but I'm wanting to take it back to how it is now for your family and Granny. Do you just you're just going to visit Granny, like you're going to her house, you're hanging out. Like, how is
Yeah.
it now? Is it the same? You just
Yeah.
chat and talk about your day and like.
Yeah, well, okay, so it's different than when she was in the physical because now we can't tell her anything she doesn't already know, So we've learned that like just showing up and being like, "Oh, hey, I did this today," and filling her in is a futile endeavor. I mean, of course she'll listen to it if we do that, but she already knows. So, but yeah, we celebrate birthdays, Mother's Day, special occasions, Christmas, all of the holidays we celebrate with Granny. So we have foods. We'll even have her favorite foods, although she can't physically enjoy them, but just to honor her, we'll include, her favorite dish. And so she's included in all of our celebrations and we visit with her often, have conversations with her often. And it's really a beautiful gift to be able to connect with her and spend time with her like that now.
For sure. It's got to be so delightful.
Yeah.
And in your book, do you talk about the details of where she is? Like, does she talk about what the substance is? Like, how is it for her to be there? And can people find that in there?
I don't go into a lot of detail about where she is exactly. She says she's on the astral plane, and she tells me that she's in the fifth dimension or fifth density, and which is a non-physical, and so we can't see. But they do have bodies. That's something, but it's just basically the bodies on the other side are made of whatever the density that they're experiencing. So we're in this third density. So we have 3D bodies, which are mortal. That's why we face death, because we sank into that lower vibration of a physical world. But like where my grandmother is, there's no physicality. So there's no death as we know it. Like that body can't die. But she has a body. It's comprised of, different material that I can't fathom because who can fathom?
I know.
Yeah.
Well, nobody in 3D can fathom.
No, all of that is out of my pay grade. When she talks about the beyond, and some things she will say, no say, when I ask, because, well, one thing is maybe I'm not supposed to know certain things, but sometimes it's because there are no words to convey to my finite mind what she would like to say.
Oh, my goodness. Wow, I'm so fascinated by this and wish we had a few more hours to just chat about you. And also, I can feel Granny. She's so darn delightful. I just adore her energy. She's so delightful. And she's, I'm saying, oh my gosh, you're so full of light. And she's like, oh, I have opinions.
Yeah,
I have
that's
opinions.
true. That is very true. Yeah, she, when she was crossing, my aunt who had crossed before her said, which we've talked to her, we've talked to other family members through my grandmother's portal. And one of the things she said was, I tried to get her to come with me, but she wouldn't. She's stubborn. She put up a fight. She wouldn't. So my aunt was there saying, like, come with me. Let's move along. And my grandmother's like, nope, I'm not leaving. Yeah.
Yep.
So she definitely, her tenacious spirit is what allowed her to stay. She's so intelligent and on top of things, even before she crossed. But I mean, now that she has crossed, I mean, even more so.
Oh man, gosh, yeah. I love her energy that I can only feel a little bit of it, but I can definitely feel that. She's lots of love and opinions.
Yeah.
Love and opinions.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know what we'd do without her. She's an incredible gift. I'm so thankful she stayed with us.
Yeah. And thank you for spreading her information and for telling this story. I think that it can offer folks so much hope and openness. And really what you wrote, right? A glimpse into the afterlife. It's, I'm sure, the tiniest portion of, our, just based on being in 3D, the tiniest portion of what the afterlife is like. But thank you for allowing us to get to see a little bit of that. And thank you, Granny, for allowing us to see a little bit of that.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be here, and I'll speak on behalf of my grandmother. She's always delighted to be able to help people.
Thank you for joining the Reluctant Medium podcast today. I hope that this episode has brought you beautiful, high vibration, and that it continues emanating from your heart space for the rest of the day and beyond. Don't forget to join The Reluctant Medium on patreon.com, and you can also visit thereluctantmedium.us and the Reluctant Medium TV show on newrealitytv.com. Until next time, my friend, may you be well.